Welcome, everyone. My guest today is lead analyst Logan Mohtashami to talk about mortgage volume, purchase apps, mortgage rates, and housing credit. We've got a lot to talk about. Logan, welcome back to the podcast.
It is wonderful to be here, Sarah, and a little crazy headline. Mortgage volume the highest since January.
Right.
Like, how did that happen? And just like we make fun of the people that say foreclosures are up 700%, context is key.
Context is key. So walk us through what the what that headline means.
Mortgage volume has been so depressed for so long that because rates have now gone from 8.40% all the way down to near 6.25%, refinances are picking up, right? So there's a lot of rate and term refinancing going on, not so much on the purchase application data, but because you're working from the lowest levels ever. And this is why I always say that existing home sales are working from the lowest levels ever recorded in history. Some of these moves right off the bat, are just extreme low level bounces. But it is true. Refinancing has picked up. Especially if anybody, which was, 7.375 to 8.5% were loans up there, you're in the sixes. So naturally, some people are doing rate and term refinancing. And that can explain that headline from the Mortgage Banking Association.
So what is purchase apps? What does that tell us about overall where we're headed?
So this becomes more interesting of a discussion. Now, just for me personally, I've had kind of the same line with this. The only rate that I've seen where you could get sustained growth were from the new home sale builders. And that was like 4.375 to 5.875. They're buy downs. The new home sale market was able to grow sales from the lows in 2022. The builders have been able to sell homes. Their stocks have done well. Smaller builders, not so much, but still that gave you growth. Where the existing home sales market, we've had these moves late in February or late in November. Mortgage rates fall. That's close enough toward the seasonality of purchase apps that when rates fall in November and December and January, purchase application data gets a little bit of growth. We get these really big month-to-month sales prints, rates go up, and that's it. So for me, the theme is that if you're looking for sustained growth, it's the same thing, and I told CNBC early on this year, you need about 4.75 to 5.875, but for like a year. You need duration. Right. And then because you're working from the lowest levels ever, you can get growth. You need mortgage demand to grow. So purchase apps are up 1% week to week. So I always like to count from whenever we've had a rate move. If I go from November of 2023, we've had 17 positive prints, 17 negative prints, and 2 flat prints. Is nothing. Done nowhere. If I take the last 9 weeks from when rates fell, another 1% plus move, 5 positive prints, 4 negative prints, 14% plus positive percentage versus 12 negative, not much. So we're not crashing, but we're not really growing. So we're kind of stuck here. Now, the seasonality of purchase application data is the second week of January to the first week of May. After May, volumes fall. Maybe if you get closer toward the new year, we'll see how this goes. But as of right now, we only have a +1. The pending home sales data had a really big beat. I think some people are still confused. Like, why did pending home sales have a big beat? Well, if you take the first few weeks of June, there were 3 straight positive. So it doesn't take much to move the needle. But if everyone's looking for sustained growth, if you go back to every housing or economic cycle, what happens is mortgage rates fall 2% plus and stay there. And they create a range for the cycle duration. And that's how you've been able to grow sales. So if you're looking at 7 to 8% as the cycle peak in rates, you really need to go 2% below that to have it where you could sustain. So you're in that, kind of 4.75 to 5.875. You could grow sales in that light. But until that happens, I haven't seen anything for the existing home sales market to make me think that. But the new home sales market was able to do it. So I think that's the thing about going out in the future. Can the builders do it again now that rates have fallen? Because they have the ability to push rates even lower if they need to. Remember, efficient sellers. This is different than the existing home sales market. Or is it that the confusion with the NAR lawsuits is that stalling some things? I still think you just go with supply and demand economics, and you're just not there yet. And I know it's August, right? It's not like people just go right in the middle of August to go in there. This is why we always say housing economics is seasonal. But if the forward-looking data gets positive, we go with it. If the forward-looking data is basically flat, we go with that. If it's negative, it's negative. This is very, very little growth right now that we've seen in the last 9 weeks.
So, adding to this uncertainty, and we've talked about this before in the past, like even though we have, starting this time last week, we started talking about, wow, rates are really moving lower and could move much lower. But if you think about it, that's been 1 week. It's like, it's hard to make anything, out of the data from 1 week. And there's all these other factors. So I'm glad that you brought up the NAR Commission lawsuit settlements, because that is, I think, an area of uncertainty for some buyers. We also wrote about, there was a study, I think Veterans United did it, that like 40% of home shoppers were hitting pause until after the election.
Don't believe that.
Well, okay, but Logan, let's think about this, right? If there's a large swath of people in this country who feel like, either way, like they might be on the Democrat side, they might be on the Republican side, depending on who wins. In their mind, the country is going to hell in a handbasket. And so I think that there's some uncertainty there.
I'm going to say this. I've literally looked back in the data in presidential cycles, and we've had some doozies, right, about uncertainty. And I have not seen anything in the data that changes the supply and demand equilibrium of what was happening out there. So I am so skeptical of surveys anyway. And I've just personally, this is one survey that I need to find at least one time in history that this was the case. And then I could maybe put okay, this can happen. I believe surveys now are so ideologically driven that I've never found it in data. I've looked at the sales for and the economics mattered more. So this is why I don't personally believe it, because I can't find one time in history that it did. And we've had other elections where the uncertainty was, here. So, we all know what President Trump's going to be like, and we all have an idea what Kamala Harris is going to be like. And we've had basically 4 years of Trump. We've had 4 years of Biden, which is somewhat going to be Harris. So there's nothing in me to think this, but I do think what I do see is that housing affordability is really expensive. Rates are high. Rates have not come down enough. But so far, everything that I've seen in the data makes sense to the economics of housing right now, not to the delaying tactics.
It will be interesting to see. I don't know if there's any way we can look at that and know after the fact if that was true, because it said up to 40%.
Then you have 40% of people in theory that were never going to buy a house next year, or the year after, or the year after that, because somebody's going to lose. And then if you're afraid of the country before and when it happens, you're not doing anything. That's why I don't believe it. Okay, so this is just me. It's like, I'm not going to buy a house because if X wins, we're all going. If this wins, we're all going. Then in theory, you're never buying a house. So call me a skeptic. Just call me a skeptic on that. But
I will call you a skeptic on that.
It's like those people that say, if somebody wins, I'm going to go to Canada. Maybe like 1 or 2 people went to Canada. And they probably threw them back in America too. So I'm skeptical of that survey because it's a very high percentage. And it's like those surveys that say, do you have $400 in your checking account? And whoever surveys and is a no, and everyone goes, oh, the entire country of America is broke. There's $185 trillion in financial assets, but nobody has 400. So I'm an old school economics guy. So I'm very skeptical of surveys that are tilted to the ideological side.
Okay, well, let's get back to mortgage rates, which, of course, we talked about last week and the beginning of this week. And you have Dudley, right? Is he a current Fed president?
Dudley used to be the New York Fed president, and he's
okay, former,
just a little bit out there. And he's now he's like, the Fed's got to cut eight times, and it's so funny. Literally, it's hilarious because literally like 8-9 weeks ago, Dudley says, the Fed funds rate is not high enough. The economy isn't cooling. And then now it's like, oh my God, we're going to get a recession. You have to cut. So you have to skittish, a little bit too skittish. But let's first talk about this. Let me take a look at exactly to see where the 10-year yield is as of this second. And we are okay. So
and this is on Wednesday, August 7th.
We're 395 on the 10-year yield. Okay. So what have we talked about the start of this year and then coming down? That 380 level is going to be a tough nut to crack, right? So, and it's going to need actually more economic weakness or the Fed pivoting, something like that to really break through to get to that next stage. And Dudley brought up something that we talked about in the last podcast. Where the hell is neutral rates for the Fed now? Because the Fed is very restrictive per their own model, not mine, not anybody else's, per their own model, because as the inflation growth rate has fallen, as wage growth has fallen, they are being more tight by keeping the rates elevated. So we're not even talking about going to an accommodative stance or anything like that. What is neutral? Neutral would be, depending on who you listen to, 8 to 10 rate cuts, quarter basis points, or 3% Fed funds, 3.5%, something like that. That would be neutral. They haven't cut once yet.
They have not cut one time. Let's just remember
what have we said since 2022? Something changed. And when something changes, their whole intention was to be as tight as financially as possible, keep financial conditions as tight as possible based on their own model until something breaks. And then Sarah Wheeler, we need confidence that inflation is going back to the 2%. Sarah Wheeler, you ask them all, they're like robots. Confidence. They all gathered up together. Let's just use this confidence line. And then when the labor market is breaking, everybody will be screaming. And then, oh, we cut rates. Look, you guys all said the labor market's breaking. This is what they're doing. They kept it as tight as possible because now people are going, you're behind the curve. So if they cut rates now, God, if they cut a quarter, they're still restrictive. Even if they cut rates 3 times, they're still restrictive based on their own model. So they did this on purpose. And they stuck to it the entire way. This is why I'm like, not a Fed pivot person. If they said, by the way, everyone, we're changing, we would like the Fed policy to go back to a neutral stance, to where 3, 6, 12-month PCE inflation is at. Oh, everyone's got a target then. We're going there. Once they do that, that is a pivot from restrictive to neutral policy, not being very accommodative or anything like that. This is just taking it to neutral. They haven't even started that yet. So that's
so okay. So Dudley's not so far out there. If we're talking about 25, if we're talking about 0.25% times 8, that's 2%. 2% or
2.5% is basically what people might be debating on where neutral is. But I'm saying is that they're like just talking, like Jerome Powell said, I'm not commenting on a rate cut in September. In any case, it's going to take some time for them to get to neutral. So the question is, from here to that point, if jobless claims starts to rise on them, what are they going to do? Okay, we need to be a little bit more aggressive. So that's, right. I think, the stage that we're at. We're all working off live data like crazy now, because the live data now will force them. Now, the bond market is already ahead of them already. And they have a little bit more validity in ground right now to be ahead of them. So again, this is a layup. There is literally no one in the stadium right now. Jerome Powell is all by himself. He's dribbling the basketball. He has a layup. Okay. He's got a computer robot behind him to help him out, a robotic person to come in. If he can't make a layup, he'll help him out. He's got this. They all have this. It's such a clear lane. Go with it. But I think Dudley is just trying to take advantage of the situation, because I think internally, the Fed internally is probably going, oh man, this is getting a little bit softer than we thought. So everything becomes more interesting, but the ball is in their courts. So all we can do is hand this tight policy off to where we are. And I understand a lot of people thought they would cut in 2022, 2023, and 2024. And they haven't done it once. They stuck to the game plan to be as tight as possible until the labor market breaks. And then they go, oh, we're cutting now and you guys can't yell at us.
Okay, on another front, let's talk about credit, right? Let's look at like delinquencies and what state is the American homeowner in?
My favorite charts. My favorite beautiful, beautiful, sexy charts that I love to take on the nerd tour and show people and dance on stage. We're gonna bring some Usher out next time. That's what we're gonna do. The chart daddy is gonna bring Usher out. Oh, now I got something in my mind for the next event, and what have we seen? So we're gonna go through a bunch of them right now. Foreclosures. Not much is happening. Right.
Not much is happening.
I mean, we're not even at pre-COVID levels. So what do we always talk about? We believe that the history of human civilization, reading and seeing, is good. 2005, 6, 7, 8, foreclosures were escalating higher. Here, we're not even at pre-COVID-19 levels. 47,000 foreclosure process. We have a country of 336 million and 162 million people working, taking the non-farm payroll and self-employed. That's it. It's not a story. I joke that, hey guys, distressed sales are up 100%. And some idiot said, look, Logan's wrong. It's up. He's like, look, Logan's saying distressed sales. It's gone from 1 to 2% year over year. It was 48% back in 2011. It's gone up 100%. That's why we don't use, we say rookie ball is the percentage of people that use it off a low base. So foreclosures look fine. Not even at pre-COVID levels. Delinquencies. Now, this is the data line that has even surprised me. 30, 60, 90, 120-day lates. Off of the all-time lows, rising, not even in pre-COVID levels. I had thought we'd get to pre-COVID levels a little bit earlier than this. Hasn't even got there yet. Looks great. And just remember, whenever the next job loss recession happens, it will take minimum 9 to 18 months from the start of the foreclosure process to get that supply onto the marketplace, because there's a 30-day, there's a 60-day, there's a 90-day, there's a 120, there's an NOD filing. Some states have judicial laws that take forever, some states don't, but it will take time to get there.
Okay, for those of you watching, we had a little technical glitch, and so Logan is back on screen, but in a different spot. So no, you're not crazy. That's what's happening right now. So Logan, you were talking about how low foreclosures are and all of those things. The other thing I wanted to talk about was that I've been going to all these conferences for AI and all this other stuff. Even without AI, there's so much better processes for mitigation. And we've really come a long way since the crisis on like how we even can communicate and help people stay in their homes. So it just feels like a whole new world.
We are never going to have a Housing 2008 done by the government again, because the government put qualified mortgage laws in place. So because of qualified mortgage, it's impossible to have the same type of recast risk. So one of the things that I always like to highlight, in Q4 2010, 23% of homes were underwater. Right now, currently, It's the lowest percentage ever recorded in history. The loan to values right now for all homes with mortgages are the lowest levels ever recorded in history. They were at extremely high levels during 2008. Over 40% of homes in America have no mortgage. That data line back then in the start of the century was like 38% and moved all the way down to the low 30s during 2008. So it's completely opposite. You don't have that kind of stress. So we mathematically cannot have a 2008 period unless we have many years of credit stress buildup and homes coming down in value. Also, we have to remember that we have a higher percentage of cash buyers after 2010. So it's just completely different. We never had what we call a credit boom or bust. And even, some of the data lines that we like to show with our HousingWire charts is that the home equity line is not exploding higher, and there's hardly any second purchase HELOCs anymore. You cannot have two different cycles, maybe in the history of economics. Forget just America. Go back to the Cleopatra era. You cannot have two cycles that are so different with their data lines than this. This is why it's funny. When I think about the history of human civilization, any man who said housing 2008 might have been one of the most incompetent beings maybe in the last 2,000 years, because you could not have two data lines that are so different on the credit side. And it was there for everyone to read. So we update these. The New York Fed updates these data lines every quarter. So the credit stress is like, I always laugh. I'm like, dude, it's not even 2019. It's not 2002 or 5 or 7, 8 or 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Where are you guys getting this from? So different marketplace, different issues. Affordability was worse in the late 70s, early 1980s. But even that period of time didn't have home prices crash. We didn't even have a negative price year in the 1980s in that. So not a lot of people know this stuff. That's the one thing I've realized, especially this year when we try to show the data going back to 1942. And it's like, when people see that, they're like, wait a second. I say, yeah, no, not a lot of people knew this. So we try to keep people as versed and updated with data as always.
And, that's very timely because we're seeing all these people talk about across the board national home prices coming down 30%, 40%, 50%. And it's like, in what world, what would cause that to happen when you have, you'd have to have a whole bunch of people walking away from their mortgage in foreclosure. And it's like, but why would they do that? 40% of people don't even have a mortgage. And then the rest of the people are locked into pretty low rates. They have great credit. So there's not a scenario that makes any sense.
Doom porn sells. I just don't. I just have to keep it as simple as that. And
did you make up the term doomer boomers,
that
or
was
did somebody
me.
else do?
Because
okay,
there's this terrible podcast, Saks Reality or Realty, whatever, and they just bring the biggest doomers of all time. So they brought Harry Dent, and Harry Dent was taking 50 to 80% home price crash. And then Peter Schiff comes off, and they highlight the photos, 80 to 90%, and they do up this Mickey Mouse as debt dollar deflation and price to gold. These people are such losers. Just say a nominal home price forecast and stop doom porning like this. So yeah, I call them doomer boomer because they had Harry Dent and Peter Schiff is historically one of the most bearish human beings on America since the creation of life. And it's just, this is the world we live in. Sarah, it's unfortunate, but the reality is that this group will get a lot of attention, and the academic world doesn't challenge them, nor do they, except one guy. And you've seen what I do online. The absolute crucible that is done when we ask men in America, men. I understand why the Russians don't do it with me, or the Chinese, or the Iranians, okay? Our foreign enemies can't do live debates with me. But when American men cannot show their name and faces in a forecast, we call them out. And I told everyone, I said 2024 was me collecting corpses. We did this for 12, 13 years. We listed every single year, every theory of a home price crash. And in 20, it's funny, Sarah, this is the interesting thing. Not a lot of people who do this actually understand that the seasonal pricing for the first part of the year means that your forecasts actually have to be twice as bad for the second half, because that's the seasonal weakness in pricing. So to offset the first half of gains, you need double, So my belief is that 90% of them know they're lying, and then 10% are just bat crazy. But we try to emphasize on teaching people models. That's why the tracker was created, right? And then just remember, in 2022, at the end of the year, when everybody went into home price crash mode, that was it. 2022 was the peak of pricing for like 20 years. What happened? 6 months, we got back to all-time highs. the forward-looking data got better. How many videos did we do from November 9th all the way up till June and just say, guys, read. And, we try our best, but we realize that, those are armies of orcs and goblins and trolls. There's millions of them, There's only one Logan. And the chart daddy's here to battle every day, 24/7.
No one can say that you aren't very theatric and very dramatic in the way that you frame these things. But we're glad you're on our side. Thank you for your insights and thanks for being on
My pleasure.
Today.
And what a crazy past few days. And just remember, everybody, that 380 pesky little nutcase right there held, and it held for the right reason. So we're going to take it one day at a time, 1 week at a time. And God, it was a lot of fun today.
Yeah, no, I know. It's a lot of fun for you every day when we have these crazy volatile rates. Logan, thanks for being on. We'll talk again soon.